Anytime something is not changing, by definition, it means what is lacking is consciousness. And as soon as we bring consciousness to something, it can't help but start to change. The number one tool we have to open up this space of possibility is the question. And that if you're willing to question all of the thoughts that pop in your mind and realize that every single thought, every single perspective is just an interesting point of view. You can keep it, you can take it, and once you realize it's interesting, you can look at it and say, is this useful? I came across bars at the very end of my athletic career. I was playing for Baltimore Ravens, and we were playing against the Patriots. We were playing against Tom Brady and the Patriots, and we were one game away from the Super Bowl. If we beat the Patriots, then we go to the Super Bowl, which is the big game. And leading up into that week, I was battling with some injuries, and I just wasn't having a very good time, you know? And I was thinking, this isn't fun anymore, but I have to finish out. And I was driving to work, and I was listening to this guy, Gary Douglas, talk about a tool, because Gary always talks about tools. And the tool it's a tool for consciousness. The tool was interesting point of view. Right? It's just interesting point of view. The long form of it is interesting point of view. I have that point of view. And what the tool is just to get us realize just because a thought pops into our mind doesn't mean that it's true. And that if you're willing to question all of the thoughts that pop in your mind and realize that every single thought, every single perspective is just an interesting point of view. You can keep it, you can take it. And once you realize it's interesting, you can look at it and say, is this useful? Right? Is this useful? Yes. Okay, I'm going to keep it. Is this useful? No. Well, what am I holding on to it for? Right? And you can allow yourself to move beyond it. And it sounds very simple, but to have that experience that where you don't feel controlled by what's going on in your head and you have a little space, there's nothing like it. It invites a certain kind of choice into your life. And so I was sitting in the meeting room just like this, and all the players were sitting out there, and the coach was up here talking, and I was sitting in the chair saying, all right, I started to feel my mind go to that negative place. And then I said, oh, yeah, interesting point of view. I have that point of view. And I felt a lightness, right? Like I wasn't stuck in that shitty feeling that I had. And then, I was like, oh, and he said something else. And I said, interesting point of view. I had that point of view. And I started doing that over and over again. Next thing I knew, it was the end of the day. And I had the best day of practice, of training that I had all year. And I was like, whoa, there's something to this. And so I looked online to find out how I could do more of this. And I saw that there was a bars class where I could learn this stuff. And it was that following week. So I said, okay, if we win the game, I'm going to the Super Bowl. If we lose the game, I'm going to a bars class. Okay? And we lost. And that's when I was introduced to bars. And there's a big thing in professional sports that when people leave the sport, it's like, what do I do now? I've put everything I am into this thing. And now that it's over, who am I? Right? It's something that a lot of athletes go through. And for me, I was able to navigate that because as soon as I left football, I stepped into this space of possibilities. And it was at the very end of my career. And I often thought, wow, what if I had found these tools while I was still competing? Wow. And that's why this day for me is so special because there are people that are still competing at a high level who can utilize this technology to take their games to the next level, okay? To the next level. Because, right, one of the things that we're always bumping up against is our limitation, right? And the big question is, once we bump up against that limitation, what do we do? What do we do about it? And the answer that I got in playing sports was to use brute force to push through it. And I tried, but even when I did, right, there was always a negative effect. Always using force, beating my things not strong enough. And I started to think about, is there a different way to do this? And that was simple. I just asked myself a question. Is there a different way to do this? and I started to get ideas. I started to get ideas. And when I was willing to choose those ideas, things started to change. And change, this is one of my favorite words to connect with consciousness. Because anytime something is not changing, by definition, it means what is lacking is consciousness. And as soon as we bring consciousness to something, it can't help but start to change. You know? And as I was watching the competition, and watching, pushing themselves to the limit, you could see visibly where people were meeting up against their limitations. And you could tell the ones that were willing to ask a question and go beyond because you could see them go through it. And then you could see other people where it's like they hit a wall and they didn't know what to do, right? Ah, this is where the magic happens. This is where the magic happens. You know? And I think the number one tool we have to open up this space of possibility is a question, is a question. So what I would like to leave everyone here with are some tools, right? The first tool we already talked about is bars, and people will have the ability to have their bars run here tomorrow. The next tool is a question. It's a question. And the question is, what else is possible? What else is possible? There's a longer version of the question, what else is possible that I haven't yet considered? This is the question that gets us outside of the box. Because something that I learned is our point of view creates our reality. And what that means is if we have a certain perspective, all we can see is that perspective. And all we get to see is that perspective is right or that perspective is wrong. And we get stuck in that. But when we ask the question of what else is possible that I haven't yet considered, new things that we haven't yet considered start to show up. And it's like magic, right? It does take a certain kind of humility to be able to be willing to ask those questions. And what I've noticed, the magic of questions is that when you start asking a question, when you start being curious about something, and specifically in this venue, in this milieu, I think the most important question is what is my body capable of? What am I capable of? What are my capacities? Because so much in life, people tell us what we're capable of, what we can do, and what we can't do. And if we're listening to that, even if they're right, like in my case, I can be a football player, but it's a limitation. When I started asking the question, what am I capable of? Right? I started to have images that no one else around me could see. And when I took those seriously and started to act on them, the craziest thing happened is other people around me started to ask themselves the same question about what are they capable of? You know? And the thing about consciousness is that it's permeable. Okay. I want to go back to the box now. All right. So I imagine the box, the training box of creating an ideal environment that manifests someone's potential. Right? That's the question, right? What can we infuse into this environment that will allow people's full potential to manifest? Because the magic of the question, as soon as we start asking the question, what we start to notice are the responses. It's like you ever notice sometimes you notice things and sometimes you don't? The things that we notice are directly related to the questions we are asking ourselves. If we are asking ourselves, is this going to be too hard? Right? What we're going to notice are all the things that make it really hard. If we ask ourselves, how can this be easier? What we're going to start to notice are the things that can make something easier. Because we've all seen what's easy for one person, right, might be difficult for another person. And if we take other people's definition about what is easy or difficult for us, it's a crapshoot. We don't know if it's going to be accurate. But if we're willing to ask ourselves how something can be easier, how we can be better, how we can improve, the information will show up for us. And I have to say, you can experiment with this. And this is the beauty of these tools, is you can use them and you can see for yourself how they work. Okay? So the question, what else is possible that I haven't yet considered? You're inviting possibilities into your consciousness to be able to choose. Okay? The second question, the second tool that I'd like to leave with you is how does it get any better than this? Okay? How does it get any better than this? Because what I've noticed when something goes great, You know, if someone says, I got a personal record, okay, that I hit the ceiling, that's the best I'll do, right? That becomes a limitation. So the ability to ask ourselves, even when it's the highest high, how, and it has to be a question, the curiosity of how does it get any better than this? Because if we ask the question, we start to get awarenesses, we start to get information about what it would take to go to the next level, right? And it's as simple as asking the question. But I think even more profoundly when things don't go so well, right? Where our mind starts to go, oh, this is going to happen again. Our mind starts to go there. And the power of the question, how does it get any better than this? It works. We start to ask ourselves and we start to see possibilities of how things can change in a way that's going to work better for us. And I encourage you, simple questions, use them. Use them. They will open up more choice and more possibilities.